Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, I'm John, this is many a true nerd, and welcome to my first thoughts on a Fallout 3 Remastered. Which isn't what you're seeing right now. This is Fallout 4, featuring a bit of Fallout 3 themed Creation Club content, because Fallout 3 Remastered doesn't actually exist yet. But despite that minor setback, I think we're actually in a curiously good position right now to make some solid predictions about how Fallout 3 Remastered is ultimately going to work. What's going to change in the remaster, what's going to stay the same, and what are the big unknowns that could go either way. And all of this is thanks to Oblivion Remastered. But okay, let's get everyone on the same page here, because you may be a bit confused as to why I'm talking about Fallout 3 Remastered at all, a game that hasn't been announced, we know nothing about, and thus functionally doesn't exist. So, back in 2021, Microsoft purchased ZeniMax, Bethesda's parent company. Naturally, as part of the process in 2020, ZeniMax shared some documents with Microsoft about their future plans, so Microsoft had the information they needed for the upcoming negotiations. But then, in 2023, during some legal action between Microsoft and the Federal Trade Commission, some of these documents came to light, including this release timeline. And this document has proven to be very accurate indeed. You may notice the dates are a bit off, probably in large part due to COVID, which also started in 2020. But if you just shuffle everything forward about 2 or 3 years, this thing has been pretty much spot on. Starfield and Redfall in 2023, Indiana Jones in 2024, Oblivion Remastered and Doom Year Zero, or the Dark Ages as it's now known, in 2025. Which leads us to Fallout 3 Remastered, a game scheduled to release 2 years after Oblivion Remastered. And thanks to this document, and considering it looks like Oblivion Remastered's been a pretty big success for Bethesda, lots of hype, good reviews, loads of players, it now looks like a good bet that Fallout 3 Remastered will happen. Based on the original release schedule, 2027 seems like a decent guess in terms of launch date. And that's great, but I think we could do something far more exciting today than just saying, oh, Fallout 3 Remastered probably exists. In fact, I think the exact nature and circumstances around Oblivion Remastered means we can make some way bigger predictions about Fallout 3 Remastered with a decent level of confidence. But, okay, let's start at the beginning, because there's something critical we need to understand here. What actually is Oblivion Remastered? Short answer, it's 99% a visual overhaul of Oblivion. In terms of mechanics, it's an extremely authentic remaster. NPCs, quests, dungeons, rewards, lockpicking alchemy, even the delightfully silly speech minigame. It's all basically the same. But there are still some changes. Loads of tiny things, and a few really big ones too. The biggest, of course, being the leveling system. Oblivion's original leveling system, where you had to monitor which skills you were raising to determine how many attribute points you would get when you leveled up, is somewhat infamous, and we'll be discussing it more later. But what's maybe more interesting is the exact way the system's update was described in Oblivion Remastered's trailer, which I'm going to quote for you right now. It's inspired by both the leveling systems of Oblivion and Skyrim, so it's the best of both worlds. Now that is very interesting, as it gives us an idea about the thinking behind Oblivion Remastered. And when you look at some of the other changes, how being over a cupboard now lets you still walk even if you can't run, the difficulty slider being replaced with 5 presets that use the same naming protocol as skill mastery, even up to the addition of a spell that didn't used to exist in Oblivion at all, clairvoyance. These are all Skyrim things that have now shuffled back into Oblivion. That's what Oblivion Remastered is. It's Oblivion with a bunch of improvements taken from, or inspired by, Skyrim. And that's where things get interesting for Fallout 3 Remastered, because if we look at Oblivion and Skyrim and Oblivion Remastered, that gives us a good picture of what sort of things they were happy to change, but also what they decided to keep the same. Given it looks like Oblivion Remastered's been a success for Bethesda, they'll probably keep the ethos behind Fallout 3 Remastered pretty bloody similar. So if we were to take the original Fallout 3 and also look at Fallout 4, could we functionally triangulate what Fallout 3 Remastered is going to look like? And I think, in some aspects, we absolutely can. So, okay, let's dive into the big stuff here, because if there's going to be one big change in Fallout 3 Remastered, a major overhaul that changes the core mechanic of Fallout 3, the equivalent of Oblivion Remastered's new leveling system, it's going to be the gunplay. Just as Oblivion's original leveling system was a bit infamous, I think the way guns feel in Fallout 3 is basically the same. It's something that could cause players new to Fallout 3 to bounce off, because Fallout 3 guns, to use the scientific term, feel a bit bloody weird. But to understand why and how that might be changed, we've got to dig into some mechanics here, because Fallout 3's guns are kind of weird by design. The key concept here is weapon spread, how much a bullet might deviate from where you're actually aiming, and all sorts of things affect this number. Every gun has a baseline of weapon spread built in. Then there's your character skill. Are you crouching? Are your arms injured? Basically, there are a whole bunch of reasons why, by design, bullets don't go precisely where your gun's pointing, especially in the early game when your weapon skill's going to be low. This, I assume, was supposed to be a way to blend shooter and RPG mechanics. By aiming precisely at your target, you maximise your chance of hitting them. Player skill, but the character you're playing as needs to be set up as a competent gun user as well, or they might miss anyway. Character skill. In just the same way as back in Fallout 1 and 2, you might miss a shot because of an unlucky dice roll, in Fallout 3, every time you fire a bullet, you're rolling a dice. So you can miss a huge number of shots even if you're perfectly aiming at the enemy because of this element of chance. And many people don't like this system, due to a simple and pretty reasonable complaint. If I aim my gun and pull the trigger, the bullet ought to go where I'm pointing. This is, after all, a pretty standard expectation in the vast majority of games that feature guns. And for any new player trying Fallout 3 for the first time, it's going to feel a bit odd. So this is where we come back to my triangulation theory. What if we look forward to Fallout 4, see what was done there, and consider how that might be retroactively applied into a remastered Fallout 3? Well, in Fallout 4, things have changed quite a lot. Weapon spread still exists, but it's much more modest, especially with a gun crafting system that lets you upgrade gun accuracy. Additionally, weapon skill, or weapon perks in Fallout 4, no longer impacted weapon spread at all. On the contrary, your character in Fallout 4 starts a game with an innate ability to fire a bullet precisely where they're pointing. Level 1 or level 100, it doesn't matter. You're always playing as a skilled marksman. Your character's just got that built in. As a result, weapon perks only impact gun damage, not gun accuracy, with the slight exceptions of Commando and Heavy Gunner, which do reduce weapon recoil for automatic or large weapons, and thus functionally increase accuracy, though no one really minded that, because you don't expect a minigun to be a perfectly accurate sniping weapon. So let's put this together. What do I think this means for Fallout 3 Remastered? Specifically, is it going to have the same sort of gunplay we see in Fallout 4? And I think the answer is actually not flippy quite. On the one hand, if the game goes over to Unreal Engine 5 like Oblivion Remastered did, there's a good chance I'll take the opportunity to make the aiming a little bit smoother, in just the same way that movement in Oblivion Remastered feels a bit different too. But on the other hand, there's something a bit interesting about Oblivion Remastered, which is, while there are some really major changes, they overwhelmingly don't impact the actual flow of the game as you play it. The new Oblivion leveling system, for example, is a huge change, but it's really a change to a spreadsheet. In the level up screen, instead of assigning between 3 and 15 attribute points, you now assign 12. It's basically just numbers in a data table, and this is true for a lot of Oblivion Remastered changes. Plants, say, used to have an innate percentage chance as to whether or not you would successfully harvest from them if you went to pick a fruit. That's now 100% under all circumstances. Fatigue used to modify melee damage, now it doesn't. Some weapon types move from their controlling attribute being strength to being agility. All of these are just numeric values changed in a calculation. And I'm not saying that's good or bad, but it is very useful to note that they overwhelmingly kept the actual moment-to-moment gameplay untouched and made the big changes in the form of modified calculations. And for this reason, I think anyone who expects a Fallout 3 Remastered to have a completely rebuilt modern gunplay will be a bit disappointed. That's just a huge gameplay overhaul that has so many knock-on effects that it's way beyond the scope of any change we saw in Oblivion Remastered. And honestly, it's way beyond the reasonable definition of a remaster. At that point, it would be a full-on remake. So what do I think Bethesda are going to do to improve the shooting for a modern audience if they're mostly limited to changes to numbers in the background in order to keep the remaster as authentic to the original as Oblivion Remastered was? And I think, plain and simple, they're just going to change the weapon spread calculation. Like I was saying just a moment ago, if your bullets are wandering off target, it's primarily a function of two things: the weapon's innate spread and your character's low skill in that weapon. And I think both of these will be modified. Firstly, most non-automatic guns will have their weapon spread hugely reduced, or maybe even eliminated. And this wouldn't even be a new thing in Fallout 3. Multiple weapons already have a 0 spread, leakage repeater for example. And as for skill-based spread, that might also be reduced or eliminated. In Fallout 3 currently, increasing your weapon skill increases damage and reduces spread. It's possible that in Fallout 3 Remastered, just like in Fallout 4, it will just increase damage and the spread part of the calculation will simply be removed. Now this would make guns a lot more accurate, though a potential issue would be that could have a knock-on effect to the game's difficulty. Fallout 3 Remaster with changes like these would be hugely easier, especially on PC with mouse aiming. Now the solution to that is much more complex, and could go off in multiple different directions. But if I had to make a guess, I'd say the most likely answer is found in both Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas. And that's weapon sway. Take the humble sniper rifle. That gun's actually got 0 spread. Point where you want to fire and the bullet will go there. The reason for this in the case of the sniper rifle, and most other weapons with scopes in Fallout 3, is probably, if you're aiming down a scope, you can't just have weapon spread, because it would be too obvious and weird that the bullet wasn't going where the scope was indicating it would. But a first-person scope weapon with 0 spread would be way too good next to all the other guns. So, when you're in first-person scoped aiming mode with the sniper rifle, something special happens. The sight sways. A lot in the early game when your weapon skill is low, and not at all when you've got maxed out weapon skill in the late game. This I think feels a lot better, though it's doing functionally the same thing as weapon spread, making it harder to aim because your character's skill is low. Accordingly, this actually happens a lot in New Vegas, where the gunplay generally feels a lot better. If you don't meet a weapon's requirements, it sways when you aim it, scoped or not. This I think is the solution they'll ultimately come to in Fallout 3 Remastered. First, all guns will have a proper iron sight aiming. That is absolutely certain. It's in Fallout 4, it's in Fallout New Vegas, iron sight aiming will happen in Fallout 3 Remastered. Step 2. Weapon spread I think will be hugely reduced or eliminated. Instead, while you're aiming down the sight, weapons will have some degree of weapon sway, just like Fallout 3's sniper rifle. The higher your weapon skill, the smaller the amount of sway, possibly using a system of thresholds where, for example, pistol sway could be eliminated at 25 in the small gun skill, whereas shotguns need a much higher investment. This compromise works, I think, because it makes gunplay much more intuitive, uses systems that already exist in a Fallout 3's code, and can be enabled mainly using changes to back-end calculations, just like most of the biggest changes in Oblivion Remastered. And I also think this will broadly be the limit of gunplay changes. The additional Fallout 4's VAT system, and especially its manually activated crits, is almost certainly an excessively big change with too many knock-on effects. So I strongly suspect the core of Fallout 3 VATs, time frozen rather than slowed, crits being based on probability, not player action, that will remain as we know now. That's not to say there won't be some more modest updates. For example, the 15% crit chance boost in a Fallout 3 VATs was probably slightly ludicrous. In Fallout New Vegas, this was reduced to just a 5%, and that's a lot more reasonable. In general, I suspect you'll see some quiet tweaks to make VATs a bit more in line with Fallout 4, where you had more base AP, and many smaller weapons cost significantly less in VATs to fire. Basically, I expect VATs in Fallout 3 Remastered to be a bit less strong, but also easier to use consistently in an extended firefight. But okay, let's move on from combat into another very interesting change that occurred in Oblivion Remastered. And that is attributes and weapon allocation, because in the original Oblivion, agility determined your damage with bows. Strength, meanwhile, was used for all melee weapons, which was a tiny bit odd because it did mean that weapons that were very traditionally aligned with dexterity, which is what agility basically is, were instead grouped in with giant hammers. And that's now changed in Oblivion Remastered, as daggers and short swords have moved over to agility, which makes a lot of sense, and means that characters who specialise in bows still have a viable hand-to-hand melee option. What that also means, though, is that Oblivion Remastered is happy to modify what attributes do, and how weapons are grouped or categorised. And that sort of change, I think, could have a huge impact on Fallout 3 Remastered. So, on the topic of a weapon allocation, let's start off with something Bethesda spent the last 2 decades struggling with: the small guns problem. For those of you who don't know, weapons in Fallout 3 are divided into associated weapon skills. A combat knife is a melee weapon, a laser pistol is an energy weapon, all fine. But there's one major problem. One category is vastly larger than any other. In fact, over half of all the ranged weapons in the Fallout 3 base game live in a single category: small guns. Not only is it the largest, they're easily the most common as well. You get pistols, sniper rifles, automatics, shotguns, and the only SMG in the game too. Picking small guns as your primary range skill is basically, objectively, the right choice. New Vegas tried to fix this by removing the tragically empty big gun skill, merging some of them into the explosive skill, to make that weapon group a bit more appealing. But the other big guns, like the minigun, just moved into the general gun skill, and that just made the new gun skill even flipping better. So in Fallout 4, Bethesda separated heavy weapons back out and put pistols and automatics in their own separate categories. But even then, the rifles category was still easily the best one, because that gave you faster firing semi-automatic rifles, the best sniper weapons, and all the shotguns. So in Fallout 76, they had to separate out the shotguns into their own category too. Basically, yes, Bethesda spent the last 15 years trying to come up with a fair way to divide up weapons so that one class isn't very obviously superior. And this, I think, has to flow back into Fallout 3 Remastered. But the question of how is a bit tricky, as they definitely won't add the vastly expanded number of weapon categories that now exist in Fallout 4 and Fallout 76. So, if I had to guess, I suspect we'll be seeing the following. As in New Vegas, the big guns that are explosive, like the missile launcher and Fat Man, they'll move into the explosive category. The big gun group, meanwhile, will remain, but they'll get to absorb some of the bigger guns that are currently in small guns. You could argue the case for shotguns, automatics or scoped rifles to be the ones to move over, but on that, I don't really have a view as to the most likely solution. But I am moderately confident that small guns will not be getting into the remaster without some adjustments, and reassigning a few guns around the existing categories feels like the most likely answer, given that means you don't need to invent new perks or whatnot, and you can keep all the skill books unchanged. And speaking of weapons, there's another very significant change in Oblivion Remastered that I haven't seen many people discussing, and that's weapon skill abilities. Just a reminder, in Oblivion, you don't actually select weapon perks, you just get them for free when the associated skill reaches a certain level. In Oblivion Remastered, they've all been majorly reworked. For example, in the original Oblivion, Blunt and Blade had identical skill unlocks. They both just gave you access to the same power attacks. But that's now changed to make each weapon much more unique. Blades can now cause bleeding and weakness to normal weapons, while Blunt gives bonus defense and can silence opponents, making it much more effective against mages. And daggers get some love too, as the new sneak abilities give bonus stealth attack multipliers just to them, as happened in Skyrim, because previously they just got the same multiplier as other one-handed weapons, meaning it was actually better to choose a stronger blade or mace for sneak attacks over daggers. And this is very interesting for Fallout 3 Remastered, because it suggests Bethesda's happy to change what different types of weapons do, i.e. real gameplay changes, if it helps each group of weapons feel more unique and serve a distinct purpose. And this is very relevant for Fallout 3 Remastered, because in Fallout 3, weapons overwhelmingly don't have a distinct purpose, but in future Fallout games, they absolutely do. In New Vegas, say, shotguns gain the ability to knock down opponents with the and stay back perk. And Bethesda apparently liked that idea, so in Fallout 76 the Enforcer perk gave shotguns a very similar ability to stagger. And adding a perk that adds stagger or knockdown to shotguns would be incredibly easy, as both things already exist in Fallout 3. To make shotguns stagger opponents, you just give them bonus limb damage, because a crippled limb forces the enemy into a stagger animation, and this is again what they already do in a Fallout 76. And as for knockdown, some existing Fallout 3 weapons already have that built in, like the Victory Rifle, so shotguns having a chance to knock down opponents would be an easy thing to add by just modifying a data table as well. Another example could be pistols. In Fallout 4, Bethesda decided their unique feature should be disarming opponents, which is again extremely easy to add back into Fallout 3, as you can already target weapons to shoot them out of your opponent's hands, and there are already perks to increase the chance to hit certain body parts, such as Sniper, increasing the chance to hit the head. So adding a perk that allowed pistols to have a hugely increased chance to hit enemy weapons should again be pretty bloody simple. And rifles are even easier. In Fallout 4, they can bypass enemy armor, and could thus bypass a part of the enemy damage resistance via a perk here as well. Now ordinarily I'd say this sort of thing would be too big a change to put into a remaster, but the changes to both the Oblivion Remastered weapon skills and the subsequent Fallout weapon specialization makes me think actually this is potentially quite likely. And I'm also open to the idea that Bethesda might need to invent a bunch of new perks, because I'm actually hoping that others will be tossed out. And I think you know precisely the ones I mean. Fallout 3 has 6 perks that do nothing but award skill points. They are weak, boring, and should be replaced by more interesting weapon specialization perks. However, I've also just stumbled across something a bit bigger here, so right. It's now time to go back to the Oblivion Remastered leveling rework. That, I think most people agree, was a positive idea, because Oblivion's existing leveling system was not liked by many. Fallout 3's leveling system is nowhere near as disliked, but that doesn't mean this isn't a great opportunity to fix one of its biggest issues. I'm talking, of course, about intelligence. Because in Fallout 3, intelligence determines how many skill points you get at every level, and given skills are how you function and interact with every aspect of the game world, this makes intelligence incredibly important. But I think that might be about to change, because can't help but notice that in Oblivion Remastered, the exact leveling system they went for was that every level now gives you 12 attribute points. Doesn't matter what you do or don't do, doesn't matter how you built your character. 12 points every level. They normalized it so progression is regular. And I suspect that in Fallout 3 Remastered, they're going to do the same thing, because this system's been causing trouble for a long time. For one, high intelligence completely breaks the early game progression. Having a tanked weapon skill started at about 35 to 40 is perfectly simple at level 1. And with intelligence of 9 or 10, thanks to an extremely generous calculation that awarded skill points equivalent to 10 plus your intelligence, you can have a weapon skill at almost 100 by level 4, which largely trivializes combat for a large portion of Fallout 3. And that's just the early game. In the late game, meanwhile, high intelligence leads to a weird scenario where there's no skills left to take. Once Broken Steel raised the level cap to 30, if you had high intelligence from the start of the game and were picking up the odd skill book here or there, you could quite simply max out every single skill and have nothing to use your skill points on. So I think there's an argument for scrapping the whole system, following Oblivion Remastered's lead, and just handing out a standardized amount of skill points per level. In terms of what that amount should be, let's do some quick mathematics here. So, in Oblivion, previously, you would gain between 3 and 15 attribute points per level, but realistically, it would be near impossible to have under 6 attribute points available. So by awarding the player 12 attribute points each level in Oblivion Remastered, you're getting a result that's about 75% of the optimal result every time you leveled up. In Fallout 3, you currently get between 10 and 20 skill points per level, by giving you 10 skill points as a base, then another skill point for every point of intelligence, though New Vegas actually halved the intelligence component, which was a lot more reasonable. So overall, we'd probably want a number somewhere inside that range. And personally, I'd be happy to put a standardized skill point allocation at 13 or maybe even 12. And I know that sounds a bit low, you've got to remember, Fallout 3 is full of cocky skill books. Because, seriously, there's a 52 of the bastards. That's over 100 skill points if you take Comprehension. Then there's the Educated perk. Then there's Tag Skills. Then you can boost your special to increase the associated skills. There is no shortage of skill points floating around in Fallout 3. And in terms of what Intelligence should do if it didn't control skill points, that one's easy. Just to follow the lead of Fallout 4 and 76 and let it modify XP. Especially given there's literally already a perk in Fallout 3 that boosts awarded XP. Just take out that perk and let Intelligence do basically the same thing. And while we're discussing special changes, there's one I would absolutely bet money on, because finally, we can fix one of the biggest and dumbest issues in Fallout 3. Because in the game right now, perception doesn't impact chance to hit. No, seriously it doesn't. Go and check. Perception affects chance to hit in Fallout 1, Fallout 2, Fallout 4, and Fallout 76, but it just doesn't in Fallout 3. The only thing it does is impact your compass, which is so incredibly useless that I hold to this day this must have been a mistake. But at least now we can finally cocking fix it. And speaking of absolutely guaranteed things, okay, quick fire round, because some stuff is just so obvious it doesn't need a full discussion. Sprinting will exist. They just added it to Oblivion, they will add it to Fallout 3 Remastered. It will use AP, and the AP drain rate will probably be based off endurance, just like in Fallout 4. Companions will move into line with all subsequent Bethesda releases and become unkillable unless you're the one doing the killing. I also strongly imagine you'll be able to send them to hang out in your player housing instead of back to their default recruitment position, given you were able to have them all hang out at your place as early as New Vegas, with companions going to the Lucky 38. There will be some sort of player home customization. This won't be anywhere near as extensive as in Fallout 4, but given Bethesda seems to just love letting players decorate their homes, and given there was already some degree of player home customization in Fallout 3 through the themes you could buy from Moira, I strongly suspect that system will just be expanded a bit to let you set up your Megaton a home as you wish. And speaking of housing, I strongly suspect they will add meat cookery into your kitchen, because the game's already full of meat that you can harvest from animals. You can already eat it raw, and there's literally already some cooking in the game thanks to the Mole Rat Wonder Meat, so this just seems like an obvious addition. The character customization will be hugely expanded. Expect more hairstyles and more chin-related sliders than any sane person would ever need. Sneak detection will be overhauled to see how close you are to changing status between hidden, caution, and danger. This was in Fallout 4, 76, and Starfield, and they literally just added it back into Oblivion Remastered. This is absolutely guaranteed. And though this next one would represent a bit of a bigger mechanical addition than anything I've discussed so far, I would be extremely surprised if we didn't get a dedicated grenade hotkey, so grenades can still be used while a different weapon's out, because that was a game changer in Fallout 4. And I would welcome this hugely because right now I never use grenades in Fallout 3 because having to change them and then change back to an actual weapon is just really annoying and slow. Vans will be added to Fallout 3 Remastered. Don't ask me why. Nobody uses vans, nobody cares. But someone in Bethesda thinks it's the greatest thing in the world since Fantasy Brother, the Clairvoyant spell, just got added to Oblivion Remastered, and it even got its own tutorial to draw attention to it. So, I guess we just have to accept that Fallout 4's vans is going to be in a Fallout 3 Remastered, and who knows, maybe it'll actually be useful for once in helping new players navigate the notoriously maze-like metro system. The compass will be more detailed, and I don't actually like this because I think the very minimal compass in Fallout 3 and New Vegas works perfectly, with tiny triangles indicating that something is nearby, but not telling you what it is or precisely how far off it's located, which help guide you without reducing the sense of discovery. But Bethesda just doesn't agree, with specific icons showing you what the nearby location is in Skyrim and Fallout 4. Now in Oblivion Remastered, we've gone as far as letting you see the exact name and distance to nearby undiscovered locations. Now, as I say, I really don't like this, because I just find it way less interesting to discover a vault because my compass told me there was a vault 200 meters in a certain direction versus exploring the wilderness and stumbling across it myself. But sadly, it's going to happen. There's nothing I could do to stop it. And finally, right, there's a few big questions that I don't have the answer to, where they really could go either way. In these cases, yeah, I'm not sure what's going to happen in Fallout 3 Remastered, but they're big interesting things to keep an eye on. So, the question of speech is maybe the biggest one, because speech in Fallout 3 has always been a bit of an odd thing. Just a reminder, when speech challenges show up in Fallout 3, you see a percentage chance to succeed, which is calculated not just using your speech skill, but also your charisma. And there's a disposition system that's literally invisible, so you have no way of knowing what your disposition with any given character is, so it's a weird system, especially in Fallout 3, where every other skill is threshold based. Like, if you want to repair the pipes in Megaton, you need 30 repair. Under 30, you can't do it. Over 30, you can. That's how every skill check in Fallout 3 works. Apart from speech, which is based on a dice roll. So sometimes you pass really hard checks you probably shouldn't have passed, and sometimes you fail really easy ones. And I suspect, yes, this might change in some capacity. Now, they might keep it probability based, but just use a way more transparent formula based purely on your speech skill. Or alternatively, they could follow New Vegas' lead and have speech just be a threshold system like everything else. But if you do that, that would leave the question, what's the point of charisma? Which is admittedly something even New Vegas wasn't able to come up with a good answer for. So, yeah, no idea what, if anything, they're gonna do with speech and charisma. Next up, power armor. Now this one I'll admit is tricky, because I think most people agree Fallout 4's power armor looks amazing. It's great that it's so big and feels like a huge walking tank. It's just really bloody cool. But adding it back into Fallout 3 will create a bunch of issues, like Do we have to add in fusion cores? Can we modify the armor? Because there is a small amount of crafting already in Fallout 3, so will we be adding a huge amount of additional power armor crafting into the game? And, okay. I suspect the most likely solution here is the simplest. Fallout 3 Remastered power armor will very likely look like Fallout 4 power armor in terms of size, animations, sound effects, because Fallout 4's power armor looks and sounds amazing. But it will still work like Fallout 3 power armor, so no fusion cores, one single damage resistance number and condition bar for the entire piece, and no modifications, though maybe it could gain immunity to fall damage, as that would be very easy to implement. Another small one here, they added quite aggressive health regeneration into Oblivion Remastered outside of combat, basically a free health top up between fights. Personally, I don't like this because that's partly what Restoration and Alchemy are for, and it definitely makes the game a lot easier. And yeah, I think it would have even less of a place in Fallout. A horrifying, dark, radioactive ruin is not a place where you should be able to regrow your health in a quiet corner. If anything, I kinda hope they go the other way and remove the ability to spam healing items in your Pip-Boy while the game's paused, which you could do in the original Fallout 3, and instead make it more like Fallout 4, where any healing had to happen in real time outside of the Pip-Boy, but I have no idea which way that will go. And finally, most important of all, the green filter. Is that going to remain? Because as much as people mock the green filter, I think it's actually a pretty critical part of Fallout 3's visual identity. But we can see from Oblivion Remastered the very distinctive vibrant colours like the green of the forest east of Skingrad that didn't really survive into the remaster. They were happy for Oblivion Remastered to have its own distinct visual identity, which leaves us with the horrifying possibility that Fallout 3 Remastered might not be just a bit green. And on that shocking revelation, how about we wrap things up there? Those are my predictions for Fallout 3 Remastered, and based on both the execution and success of Oblivion Remastered, I'm actually pretty confident about quite a few of these, so I guess there's nothing to do now but wait a couple of years and see just how right or wrong I ultimately was. So hopefully you join me in 2027 for that. But in the meantime, I've been John, this has been Many a True Nerd. And if it turns out I'm right, then maybe, just maybe, Fallout 3 Remastered will be better than you think. Thank you very much, and goodbye. If we just hide the bodies, nobody needs to know about this. Yes! My stupid plan has worked! It turns out I'm a genius! The giant rat scorpion is not gone! Oh, hang on, there's more yet though, I'm still being very shocked. Guys, where's the NCR? Nobody needs to know.